Are we ready for this? We must be.
The medical bay of the Terran Exodus was supposed to feel safe. Everyone said that. Everyone believed that. Everyone treated it like a sanctuary made of white walls and humming machines and the soft scent of antiseptic that floated in the recycled air like a promise. For most of the crew, it was a sanctuary. For Nera, today, it felt like an interrogation chamber wearing a doctor's coat. She sat on the edge of the diagnostic bed, not perched, not relaxed, not resting. No, she hovered over the thin cushion as if any attempt to settle her weight might make something inside her crack again. A quiet tremor kept traveling up her arms, like muscle memory desperately trying to brace for another impact. The overhead lights glared down with cold precision, too bright for comfort, too honest to hide beneath. Every glint of metal reflected in her peripheral vision. Every machine beep stabbed into the silence. Every pulse of the auto-cleaner vents made the room inhale with her, exhale with her, breathe around her like something alive and watchful. She didn't want the room to breathe with her. She wanted the room to forget her. The ship's doctor had left minutes ago, leaving behind silence and the soft hiss of sterilization mist. His words lingered, sharper than the antiseptic sting still coating her skin. For fractured ribs, deep contusions, cranial stress trauma, evidence of force, evidence of violence. He tried to keep his tone neutral, but the report didn't lie. His eyes didn't lie. The way he lingered by the door, torn between protocol and compassion, didn't lie either. He'd have to file the incident. He knew it. She knew it. And she couldn't let that happen. Not with what she knew. Not with who did it. Not with what a report would ignite. So when he asked her to confirm the cause of injury, she reached for the only shield she had left. It was an accident, she'd whispered. A lie wrapped in brittle threads. A whisper meant to end the conversation. It didn't end the pain radiating through her ribs. It didn't end the ringing in her skull. It didn't end the memory of impact replaying behind her eyes like a glitching hollow-reel stuck on the worst frame. But it ended the doctor's questions. For now, she was alone, or she thought she was, until a shadow stretched past her feet like an eclipse slowly crossing her world. Nera's breath stalled. She didn't look up at first. Didn't want to. Didn't need to. She knew that silhouette. Every human aboard the Terran Exodus knew it. Thane filled the doorway in absolute silence. 7 feet tall, plates of obsidian armor like scales rippling along his limbs. Shoulders broad enough to cast darkness across half the room. 3 jointed fingers ending in claws that reflected the unforgiving lights. A Kever warrior of the Ashborn clutch. Humans joked that Kever evolved from nightmares. Thane proved them wrong. Nightmares weren't that disciplined. Nera, he said. His voice came as a low, layered series of clicks, harmonics, and throat vibrations, tones that the translator molded into flat standard. But even through the monotone, even through the neutrality, something sharp lived beneath the surface. She forced her eyes upward. Thane stood perfectly still, yet everything about him screamed motion, coiled tension, silent awareness, a predator's readiness sharpened to a point. And his eyes were locked on her with a focus that pinned her more effectively than restraints. "You are not fine," he said. Nera's fingers curled into the fabric of her uniform. I told the doctor what happened. You told him you fell." She swallowed. "You did not fall." Her pulse stuttered. "It was an accident." Thane blinked his inner eyelids, a slow, predatory motion that humans had learned to interpret as disbelief. "Your ribs were fractured by external force," he said. "Your concussion is from impact velocity exceeding what a fall could produce under stable gravity plating." Her breath caught. She knew he would check. She knew he would investigate. Kever didn't ignore threats. Kever didn't overlook anomalies. And Thane, specifically, treated logic like oxygen. He continued, voice calm and merciless. "Station Meridian's gravity plating logs show no malfunction. No instability. Not even minor flux." "Thane," she whispered. "Please." "You were harmed," he said. "By someone." Her chest tightened around something far heavier than cracked ribs. Fear. Humiliating, choking fear. Not of Thane. Never of Thane. She feared the consequences of naming the one who had done this. She feared the chain reaction, the inevitable retaliation, the escalation. And, buried deep, she feared that this wasn't over. that the universe didn't care, that nothing would change. It doesn't matter, she said softly. Just let it go. Thane tilted his head in that slow, alien way that sent a shiver crawling across the back of her neck. Humans, he said simply, are terrible liars. A breath escaped her, half laugh, half sob. But she didn't speak, didn't confirm, didn't deny. She couldn't. Thane's claws flexed once, scraping faint grooves into the metal panel under his hand before retracting. For a moment, she thought he might push, demand the truth, corner her with logic and loyalty until she broke. Instead, he stepped back, not retreating, reassessing, adapting in that unsettling, thoughtful way Kever had mastered. He stood in silence for a long second. Then he turned, walked out. The doors slid shut behind him, and Nera exhaled shakily, unaware that the breath she released would echo into something far larger than fear. Because Thane did not leave defeated. He left with purpose, not to interrogate her further, not to debate the facts, not to press her boundaries. He left to do what his species had done long before humans ever left their planet. He went hunting, not for food, not for territory, not for glory. He hunted for the one who hurt his packmate, his teammate, his human, his friend. The ship hummed its steady rhythm around Nera. But the universe beyond it was no longer steady at all. Thane was moving, and when a Kever warrior moved with intent, something, somewhere, was already doomed. The Terran Exodus was a floating city of steel, circuitry, and species who had learned, begrudgingly or willingly, to share the same corridors. Within its hull lived thousands of souls, each with their own routines, their own corners of the ship, their own little pockets of existence. But there was one universal truth aboard a vessel this size. Nothing stayed secret for long, especially not pain, especially not when it belonged to one of theirs. The recreation room was never meant for gatherings of silent fury. It was meant for decompressing after shifts, for synthetic coffee that tasted vaguely like moss, for table games that humans invented and aliens found endlessly confusing, for conversations that filled the room with noise and laughter and complaints about duty rosters. But tonight, the atmosphere was different. Heavier, sharper, like static before a lightning storm. Lieutenant Arya Chun stood at the hollow table, hands braced on either side, shoulders tight beneath the uniform that usually fit like second skin. She had the kind of posture that didn't need rank insignia to be recognized. Authority lived in her spine. Opposite her, Private Jackson paced with restless energy, boots thudding against the metal deck in uneven rhythm. Every few steps he cracked his knuckles, not in idle habit, but in simmering impatience. Sergeant Akoy sat on the edge of a table, one leg dangling, fingers dancing across the interface of a portable datapad. His expression carried that glint, the mischievous, dangerous, electrifying spark of a tech specialist who knew he could break the rules faster than anyone could enforce them. When Thane entered, no one looked surprised. They looked ready. Shin lifted her gaze. You heard. The words landed like a verdict, not an inquiry. Thane stepped forward. She told me she fell. Jackson spat out a humorless laugh. Yeah, and I'm the Emperor of Seoul. Chin's jaw tightened. She's covering for someone. Akoy tapped twice on his pad. We know who. The room dimmed slightly as the hollow table lit up. Static crawled across the surface, lines jittering, resolving into footage captured by Station Meridian's static range cameras. The image was grainy. Old technology. Low angle. But clear enough to tell a story no one wanted to see. The trade corridor. Nera, carrying supply crates. Moving carefully, weaving between crowds. Her steps slow, fatigue visible in her posture. Then, another figure blocking her path. A Vorkai. Cracks. Massive, even for his species. For arms thick as hydraulic pistons. Armor like skin plates shifting with every movement. Eyes dull with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. The recording played out with muted tension. Nera attempting to step around. Cracks stepping with her, deliberately obstructing her. Their shapes silhouetted against neon advertisements flickering in the hall. Then the argument, too far from the mic to capture, but clear enough in their body language. Nera, nervous, tense, attempting to de-escalate. Cracks, looming, mocking, dismissive. Then, the moment time seemed to freeze around. Cracks reaching out, grabbing her by the vest, lifting her like she weighed nothing, and throwing her aside as if discarding trash. Her body struck the bulkhead with brutal force. The crate exploded into fragments. She crumpled. Even without audio, the damage was visible. Thane's claws extended unconsciously. He didn't seem aware of it. The grooves cut into the hollow table's metal surface told the story for him. Chen inhaled slowly through her nose. Station security classified it as a cultural misunderstanding. Thane tilted his head. Explain. Jackson rounded on him. Apparently Vorkai have a habit of moving anything smaller or slower out of their way. Whether it's a crate, a droid, a sapling, or a person. Akoi's fingers paused above his pad. Security said she shouldn't have been standing where a Vorkai intended to walk. Thane blinked. She was in a designated walkway. Yep, Akoi replied. Apparently, even walkways belong to the biggest guy who wants them. Thane's pupils narrowed. This is illogical. Welcome to the galaxy, Jackson muttered. The hollow footage froze at the frame where Nara's body hit the wall. Her limbs slack. Her face twisting in pain. Her hair drifting in the microgravity sway of weaker plating zones. Chen looked at each member of her team, holding their gaze for a heartbeat each. No report from Nara means command will not authorize action. They won't risk diplomatic tension with the Vorkai Trade Guild, especially since station security already dismissed it. So that's it. Jackson snapped. We're just supposed to act like this didn't happen. No, Chen's voice dropped to a razor-sharp softness. That's not what I said. A long silence followed. Thane broke it. What do you intend? Chen lifted a brow. Officially? Nothing. Jackson cracked his knuckles again. And unofficially? Sergeant Akoi grinned. Slow and dangerous. The kind of grin that meant trouble was about to happen at the speed of impulse. Unofficially, he said, we're going on shore leave. Thane's chest expanded in a controlled inhale. In Kever culture, shore leave didn't mean rest. It meant opportunity. It meant strategy. It meant freedom from oversight. It meant the hunt. Chen tapped the hollow table, bringing up a map of Station Meridian's trade district. Krax's stall pulsed red. He's still there, she said. Selling scrap. Bragging. Loudly. Jackson's fists clenched. Then we'll be louder. Thane stepped forward, studying the map with the predatory stillness of a creature born to track, to outmaneuver, to close the distance between threat and justice. You have a plan, he said. Chen nodded. Akoi added, and even if we didn't, we'd improvise. Humans are annoyingly good at that. Thane tilted his head. This will be dangerous. Yeah, Jackson said. That's the point. Something shifted in Thane's posture. A subtle lowering of his center of gravity. A faint spreading of weight across clawed feet. A tilt of the head reflecting instinctive readiness. Humans might have missed it. Chen did not. She smiled the smallest smile, a human war smile. The kind that carried no humor, only intent. We're not letting this slide, she said. Thane nodded once. Slowly, firmly. We hunt, he declared. Chen exhaled. We act as a unit. No loose ends. No trail leading back to the Exodus. Jackson cracked his neck. I'll handle the physical persuasion. Akoi twirled his datapad. I'll handle the electronics. Chen crossed her arms. And I'll handle station security. Thane's crest fins flared slightly in approval. Efficient. Jackson grinned. Oh, we're beyond efficient. We're pissed. Thane considered this. That seems useful. It is, Jackson confirmed. Very. Chen shut down the hollow table, plunging the room into low ambient light again. Gear up, she said. 15 minutes. Docking Bay 4. Thane turned to leave, but paused at the threshold. He looked back at them, the fragile humans who were anything but fragile when united. You act as a pack, he said. We act as her pack, Chen corrected. She may not understand that yet. But she will, Jackson added, voice low and fierce. Nobody touches one of ours. Akoi smirked. Not without getting touched back. Thane nodded. He had read about human pack instincts in xenopsychology briefings. He had studied their unusual loyalty, their relentless protectiveness, their absurd willingness to defend someone they claimed as theirs. But seeing it now, feeling it in the air, was different. This was not academic. This was not theory. This was not cultural observation. This was the human's version of clutch fury. Ferocious, focused, and aimed at Krax. The thought resonated inside Thane with ancient clarity. This was why Kever formed alliances. Not for treaties, not for resources, not for politics, but for this. For the simple, overwhelming truth that humans were persistence predators, And once they bonded with you, they were yours. And you were theirs. Thane left the recreation room and made his way to the armory, each step deliberate, each breath steady, each thought sharpening into instinct. He wasn't hunting alone anymore. He had a pack, and the pack had chosen its prey. Meridian Station was many things. A floating bazaar, a neutral trade post, a diplomatic hotspot, and the galaxy's single largest hub of bad ideas. But today it was something else. A hunting ground. Not that the crowds knew it. To them, nothing changed. Merchants shouted over each other. Hover drones zipped back and forth. Alien families wandered through streams of flashing neon lights. And the air smelled like a cocktail of spices, engine coolant, and cheap fried synth meat. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was distracting. Perfect. Chun, Akoi, Jackson, and Thane stepped off docking arm C7 like they were just another shore leave quartet looking for overpriced drinks and terrible decisions. That was the point. Humans had a phrase for this kind of entrance. Wolves in tourist clothing. Thane didn't quite understand the idiom, but he understood the intent. He walked behind them, shoulders relaxed, posture non-threatening. For a Kever, anyway. Most species couldn't tell the difference. Even relaxed, he looked like a living weapon. Chun led them through the first district, her gaze scanning each storefront. A handmade pottery stall, an overpriced cybernetic boutique, a noodle stand that was objectively and mathematically unsanitary. None of it mattered. They were looking for one thing. One creature. Krax. The Vorkai brute who had picked up Nera like she was discarded cargo and thrown her at a bulkhead with enough force to crack ceramic plating. Every time Thane replayed the image in his mind, his claws flexed involuntarily. Humans didn't see it. But Akoi saw Chin glance back once. Just once, checking Thane's emotional temperature. She wasn't worried he'd snap. She was worried he wouldn't give them the chance. Jackson muttered under his breath. I swear, if Krax even looks at us funny. Chin raised a hand, silencing him. Keep eyes forward. No names. No talking about the mission. No rushing the approach. Akoi smirked. Ah, come on. I practiced rushing. Thane tilted his head slightly. Humor is inefficient, he said. Yeah, Akoi replied. But it keeps us alive. Thane did not respond. Humans were strange. 5 minutes into the walk, they passed into the trade district. The lights got brighter. The crowds got thicker. The soundscape grew aggressively obnoxious. Shrieks, laughter, haggling, alarms, music blasting from cracked speakers. Jackson winced. Why does every station in the galaxy smell like hot metal and guilt? Focus, Chin murmured. Because she'd seen him. Krax, slumped in an oversized stone-carved chair. For arms. Gray, ridged skin. Eyes like volcanic obsidian. 2 security drones hovering near him like lazy insects. He laughed loudly at some joke a passing merchant told, the vibration of his voice shaking the metal of his stall. He wasn't worried. He wasn't hiding. Why would he? He'd gotten away with it. Nera hadn't reported the assault. Station security wrote it off as a species misunderstanding. And Krax, the monster who had thrown a human until ribs cracked, had been given nothing more than a warning. The universe was not fair. But humans? Humans were persistent. And persistence was the only thing that scared predators like Krax. Chin approached calmly. The others drifted into surrounding positions with casual ease, the way soldiers do when they've practiced this 100 times in simulations. But never admit it. Chin stopped 2 meters from the stall. Krax, she said. The Vorkai's eyes swiveled toward her. Ah, humans. His voice rumbled like shifting stone. You wish to purchase something? My merchandise is not cheap. Nor is my time. We're not here to buy, she replied. Krax smirked. Then you are wasting both. Behind him, the security drones drifted slightly, adjusting their targeting parameters. Akoi slid a finger inside his jacket pocket, brushing the jammer device he'd prepared earlier. Not yet. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. Chin's hands stayed relaxed at her sides. Jackson stood near a pillar, leaning casually. Thane was silent as death, standing just outside the Vorkai's peripheral vision. Krax, Chin said evenly. You assaulted one of our crew on your last encounter. Krax shrugged, stone plates grinding. She was small. She was in my way. I moved her. Thane inhaled sharply. Chin didn't look back. She didn't have to. Humans do not appreciate being moved like cargo, Chin said. They are soft, Krax replied. Everything soft can be moved. Akoi's jaw tensed. Jackson cracked a knuckle. Fane's claws slid out with a quiet click. Still, no one acted. Chun tilted her head slightly. Do you regret injuring her? Krax laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a snort. A full, booming laugh. Regret, he roared. She should thank me for the lesson in survival. That was the moment. The exact moment. Chun nodded to Akoi. Go. Akoi flicked his wrist. The jammer activated with a pulse so small no one in the crowd noticed. But the two security drones dropped like stones, their lights flickering out. Jackson moved first. He stumbled into the stall's support beam, knocking a cascading rack of pottery onto the drones. Pure coincidence, of course. Chun stepped into Krax's space. Fane stepped behind him. Krax frowned. What is this? Chun smiled. Persistence. The assault was surgical. Humans weren't strong individually. But together? Together they were a different species. Jackson took out Krax's left knee. Chun drove a shock baton into the Vorkai's nerve cluster. Akoi tripped his lower arms with a wire snare. Fane caught Krax's upper limbs and twisted. Hard. Krax roared in pain, swinging wildly. But his blows missed. Because the pack had already moved. Humans flowed like water. Kever moved like shadow. The Vorkai tried again. A heavy downward swing meant to crush a skull. Fane caught the arm midair. A perfect stop. Krax froze. Just long enough for Chun to strike again. Her baton slamming into his ribs. Electricity coursing through his massive frame. Krax collapsed onto one knee. Jackson stepped behind him, pressing a boot between his shoulder blades. Akoi leaned in close, smiling. Congratulations, he whispered. You've just experienced a cultural misunderstanding. The crowd gasped. Merchants backed away. Security alarms began blaring. But the humans didn't run. They adjusted their uniforms, straightened their posture, and began calmly browsing a stall of decorative pottery as if absolutely nothing had happened. Fane stood over Krax. Not gloating, not roaring, just watching. Silent, patient, predatory. Krax looked up at him, rage and humiliation burning in his obsidian eyes. You think this changes anything? He spat. I will remember this. Fane bent slightly, speaking in a low voice only Krax could hear. So will she. Krax fell silent. Because he understood. He had touched the wrong human. He had provoked the wrong crew. He had made a mistake every predator in the galaxy learned eventually. Humans hunt in packs. Station security finally arrived. They found 3 deactivated drones, 1 groaning Vorkai, 4 humans examining pottery, and a Kever warrior who hadn't moved in 10 minutes. Official report? A malfunction caused an accidental altercation. Unofficial truth? The pack had hunted. The predator had been taught fear. Justice, human justice, had been delivered. Fane left the stall last, following the others toward the docking arm. As he walked, one thought echoed through his mind. No one harms the pack. No one harms Nera. Not ever again. The first sign that something was wrong came as a faint tremor beneath Ria's boots. Not a violent shake, not the kind that triggers alarms or tactical displays. Something smaller, more intimate, like the ground itself whispering that it had woken up angry. She paused mid-step, one hand instinctively pressing down on the smallest Meridian cub curled against her chest. The little creature chirped softly, sensing her tension. Fane felt it a second later. His frilled crest lifted, a soundless ripple of instinct traveling through him. A Kever warrior didn't shiver, but something close to it tightened through his massive posture. He turned slowly, scanning the forest with a predator's precision. The earth moves with intention, he murmured. Ria didn't need translation. She'd learned, painfully, that intention in this forest usually meant danger. The rescued Meridian cubs clustered behind her legs, their glowing amber eyes trembling with confusion and fear. They had survived the hunt, survived the blood, survived the cold night that tried to swallow them whole. But survival had a cruel habit of demanding more. Ria whispered, "Stay close, not to the cubs, but to Thane." He didn't argue. He never argued when her voice fell into that quiet, lethal tone, the tone of a soldier who'd already calculated the odds and found them ugly. They emerged from the treeline into a clearing where the Terran dropship hovered with its engines low and thrumming. This was supposed to be safety. Medical crews waited at the ramp, scanners glowing faint blue. Officers prepared containment harnesses for the cubs. No one breathed easily. No one moved carelessly. Rhea stepped forward with the smallest cub still clinging to her armor. Its tiny claws wouldn't release her. She didn't force it. She'd learned long ago that small hands often held on the hardest. Dr. Howard approached first. He was trembling, not from fear but from the sheer weight of what he was observing. "Their readings are strange," he muttered. "Their vitals stabilize only when they're near you or Thane. They spike violently with everyone else." "Because they're scared," Rhea said. Howard shook his head. "No, this pattern isn't fear. This is choice." That word sank into her like a stone dropped into deep water. Choice meant imprinting. Imprinting meant allegiance. Allegiance meant someone, some creature, some elder, some force, would challenge that decision. And challenges on Meridian soil were never polite. Before she could respond, another tremor throbbed through the clearing. Heavier, sharper, a spine-deep vibration with purpose behind it. The dropship lights flickered. The cubs whined in unison. Officers looked around in confusion as the comms erupted with panicked reports. "Energy spike beneath the crust. Something's moving under the clearing. We're detecting a subterranean displacement." Rhea's pulse kicked into high gear. Thane slowly lowered himself into a defensive posture. His voice was gravel when he spoke. "The hunt is not finished." Rhea swallowed hard. "No," she said quietly. "It followed us." The ground split open with a deep, ripping crack. Dust and soil burst upward. The medical team stumbled back. A monstrous silhouette rose from the darkness. Massive, ancient, humming with a dangerous intelligence that made Rhea's skin crawl. A Meridian Prime. Its 4 golden eyes fixed on the cubs. Its breath rolled out in searing waves. Every part of its towering body radiated a single, violent truth. It had come to reclaim what was taken. Rhea shifted the cub in her arms, shielding it with her body. Thane stepped in front of them with his spear angled low, shoulders squared in a warrior's final vow. "I will not yield what chose us," he growled. Rhea grabbed his arm. "Thane, don't. This isn't prey. This is guardianship." The Prime growled, a sound so deep it shook the marrow in her bones. The cubs behind her whimpered, huddling together, but none ran toward the Prime. Not one. They pressed closer to her. They touched their heads to her boots. They trembled, yes, but they trembled beside her. The Prime noticed. Its eyes narrowed. Rhea lifted her chin. "They're not going with you," she whispered. The Prime lowered its massive head, muscles coiling with lethal intent. Rhea knew a charge when she saw one forming. She drew her sidearm, knowing full well it wouldn't matter. She didn't draw it to fight. She drew it to distract. To buy seconds. To die standing if she had to. Thane braced beside her without hesitation. "If it comes," he said, "we fall together." But something changed. A tiny sound broke the tension. One of the smallest cubs, shaking so hard its legs barely held it upright, stepped away from Rhea's leg. It walked forward, slow, terrified, but determined, and tilted its head up at the Prime. Then, with a soft, trembling exhale, it released a melodic purr. A declaration. A rejection. A choice. Thane's voice broke in disbelief. "It's claiming you." The Prime went utterly still. Its ancient mind churned. Its gaze shifted from the cub to Rhea. The forest held its breath. The world narrowed into one impossible truth. A human had been chosen over a Prime. The law of their species was old. Immutable. Unbreakable. Chosen bonds could not be overturned. Not even by a Prime. The great beast drew back slowly. Its spines lowered. Its growl turned into a thunderous, lingering warning. Then, with a final, furious rumble, it sank back into the earth, disappearing into the darkness below. The crack in the ground sealed behind it. But the forest did not relax. Because this wasn't acceptance. This was a promise. A Prime never forgot a challenge. A Prime never forgave a thief. The quiet that followed was suffocating. Rhea knelt beside the brave little cub. Its whole body trembled as she gently placed her hand on its head. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. The cub pressed its forehead to her chest. It trusted her completely. Too completely. Thane lowered his weapon with a slow exhale. "The Prime has marked us." Rhea shook her head. "No, it marked me." She looked at all the cubs, confused, scared, clinging to her as if she were their last anchor in a world that kept trying to take them. She closed her eyes and accepted the truth she never wanted. If the Prime wanted a war, if the Prime wanted to reclaim them, it would come for her, and she would be ready. The return to the Terran Exodus was supposed to feel safe. Rhea kept telling herself that as the dropship doors sealed behind her, as the hum of the engines vibrated through her bones, as the huddled Meridian cubs pressed against her legs like frightened children clinging to their mother. She kept repeating it in her mind. You're safe. They can't reach you here. Not on this ship. But fear didn't care about steel hulls. It lived inside the places armor couldn't cover. Thane remained beside her as they walked through the wide metallic corridor toward containment. The ship's lighting dimmed to night mode hues, soft blues and grays. Yet the atmosphere felt heavy, as if the air itself knew something ancient and terrible had followed them home. Thane's claws tapped rhythmically against the deck plating, but even his footfalls sounded subdued. His instincts were on full alert. His every movement guarded, deliberate, almost ceremonial. When the doors to the isolation ward slid open, medical officers and researchers stood waiting. Their expressions were a mixture of awe and dread. Never in recorded Alliance history had Meridian cubs allowed themselves to be handled. Never had they chosen an outsider. Never had they bonded with a human. The cubs clung closer to Rhea. One officer cleared his throat nervously. We've prepared biosecure enclosures. They're large enough to accommodate movement and... No, Rhea's voice was soft, but carried a weight that froze the room. She stood with her shoulders squared, one hand resting protectively on the smallest cub's head. They don't go into cages. They're not cages, the doctor began, but Thane stepped forward, looming over him like a silent verdict. They remain with her, Thane said, every word unyielding. The officer swallowed hard, nodding quickly. Of course. Temporary accommodations can be arranged. The cubs chirped in anxious harmony, picking up on the tension. Rhea lifted the smallest one into her arms. It pressed itself against her chest, trembling. She whispered gently, "You're all right. I've got you." The ship felt different now. Every corridor seemed narrower. Every shadow felt deeper. The edges of the world seemed to blur, as though the forest's darkness had followed them all the way into space. But it wasn't the darkness she feared. It was the Prime's final look before it sank back into the earth. It hadn't retreated. It had deferred. Inside the temporary habitat, Rhea finally sat down. The cubs gathered around her, forming a protective pile of warm fur and glowing eyes. Thane positioned himself near the door, every instinct screaming vigilance. The lights dimmed automatically, casting the room in a soft, calming glow. It might have worked for any other living creature on the ship, but not Rhea. She couldn't shake the sense of being watched. A soft tone chimed through the speaker grid. "Commander Rhea Corcoran, you have an incoming priority signal from Alliance High Command." She handed the smallest cub to Thane, who held it carefully with both hands, his warrior posture contradicting the gentle way he cradled the tiny creature. Then she stepped to the console. With a deep breath, she accepted the transmission. The hologram that flickered to life showed Admiral Voss, the kind of man whose stern presence could silence a room without speaking. His gaze dropped instantly to the cubs behind her. "So the reports were correct," he said quietly. Rhea didn't hide the truth. "They chose us." Voss exhaled slowly. "Rhea, do you understand the implications?" "I do. The Meridian Prime will come for them." "I know. And it will come for you." Rhea didn't answer. She didn't need to. The cubs' trust had become a mark, a claim, a challenge. And the universe had never been kind to the ones who broke ancient laws. Voss continued, voice lowered. "We received a deep scan from the station just before you departed. That tremor you experienced wasn't localized to Meridian. It echoed across star systems." Thane growled softly. "A warning." "No," Voss corrected. "A summons. The primes are calling to each other. They're gathering." Rhea felt the blood drain from her face. Gathering primes meant one thing. A reclamation, violent, absolute, unstoppable. A reclamation that would tear apart ships, planets, anything in the way. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "How long before they reach us?" Admiral Voss looked at her with something dangerously close to pity. "They're already moving." The transmission ended. The room felt colder. Thane straightened, his scales rising in a silent reaction to danger. "We must relocate the cubs to a fortified vessel." "No," Rhea said immediately. "That will only provoke them. They don't see us as captors. They see us as chosen. If we run, we make ourselves prey. And if the cubs panic, the Prime will tear through the entire fleet to get to them." Thane stepped closer. Then what do you propose? Rhea looked down at the smallest cub, its warm body curled against her leg. Its delicate, glowing eyes stared up at her, as if she were the entire world. We don't hide, she said. We make contact. Not to surrender. To negotiate. Thane stared at her, as though she'd grown a second spine ridge. You wish to speak with a prime? Alone, you would be devoured. Not alone, Rhea replied. With them. She stroked the cub gently. They won't harm their own. Thane's voice lowered. But they may harm you. She smiled faintly. Then I suppose I'll trust them the same way they trusted me. For a long moment, Thane said nothing. His throat sacs pulsed in a slow, conflicted rhythm, a sign of deep internal debate among his kind. Finally, he bowed his head slightly. I will go with you. Rhea shook her head. You can't. They're already angry enough that the cubs chose me over one of their own. If you stand beside me, they'll see it as a challenge. Thane's jaw clenched hard. I do not leave my pack. Rhea stepped closer, placing her hand on his forearm. You're not leaving. You're protecting. If this goes wrong, someone needs to keep them safe. Someone strong enough to survive what follows. Thane looked at her hand, then at her eyes. He gave a slow nod, but it wasn't agreement. It was something heavier. Acceptance of a truth neither of them wanted. The ship's alarms broke the silence. A deep, blaring wail. Not mechanical. Not artificial. A resonance. A pulse. It shook the room from the inside out. The cubs froze. Thane recoiled, frills rising. Rhea's heart stuttered in her chest. Because this sound wasn't a strike. It wasn't a breach. It wasn't even an attack. It was a call. A prime was already here. The lights flickered. The floor vibrated. And Rhea knew. The forest had come to the stars. And it had come for her. The Terran Exodus drifted in the quiet dark, engines humming softly, as if ignorant of the ancient force now circling it like a silent starborn predator. Rhea stood alone in the observation chamber, the glass stretching above her in a great sweeping arc that exposed the entire black expanse of space. The cubs slept in a small pile at her feet, their breaths soft, warm, and fragile. They trusted her completely. They had no idea what waited just beyond the ship's shields. A ripple of movement shimmered through the void, like a current beneath still water. Rhea leaned forward, slowly, cautiously, until her palm pressed against the glass. Her reflection stared back at her. Tired eyes, bruised skin, hair pulled back in a crooked tie, a uniform smudged with dirt and blood and something older. She didn't look like someone a prime would challenge. She didn't look like someone an ancient species would cross the stars to reclaim. She didn't look like someone who should matter in a universe built on power. But she did matter. Because she had been chosen. A low vibration traveled through the hull, subtle enough that only someone waiting for it would feel it. Rhea exhaled shakily as a silhouette formed in the distance. Massive, slow-moving, shaped more like a living mountain than a creature. The prime drifted through vacuum as though swimming through water, its spines glowing with dim bioluminescent light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The cubs stirred. One lifted its head and whimpered softly. Rhea knelt and placed her hand on its back. I know, she whispered. I feel it too. Thane entered the chamber without a sound. His scales were dim, his posture tense, the air around him charged with the instinctual readiness of a warrior preparing for his doom, but refusing to step aside from it. He came to stand behind her, towering, silent, unmovable. It waits, he said quietly. It calls your name without sound. Rhea didn't answer. She rose slowly, nerves raw, courage trembling like a thin wire pulled tight. She placed both hands against the glass now, staring into the void at the prime's glowing eyes. They weren't furious. They weren't vengeful. They were mournful. Something inside Rhea broke a little. She whispered, You lost them. I know. I'm sorry. The prime's bioluminescent patterns flickered in response, shifting like language, ancient, wordless, heavy enough to crush entire civilizations. She didn't understand the meaning, but she understood the emotion. Pain. Rhea felt the cubs move closer behind her. Not in fear, in recognition. Acceptance. They padded to her side and pressed their foreheads gently against her legs. The message was clear. They weren't prisoners. They weren't confused. They weren't lost. They chose her. And the prime, for the first time, hesitated. The ship's lights dimmed as the creature's energy signature resonated across the hull. Panels flickered. Consoles glowed. sensors overloaded with unreadable data streams. For a moment, Rhea felt as though the creature was reaching through the void, touching her mind, searching her memories, weighing her heart. The pressure intensified. Thane stepped forward immediately. Enough. His voice was a growl layered with fury and protective instinct. If you harm her, you will face me. The Prime paused. Its glowing eyes shifted, not to Rhea this time, but to Thane. A recognition passed between them. Predator to predator. Guardian to guardian. Not rivals. Not challengers. Equals. Rhea exhaled slowly as the pressure ebbed. The cubs nuzzled her ankles in relief. The Prime lowered its massive head. Not a bow. Something older. Something solemn. A gesture written into the bones of its kind long before humans ever saw the stars. A gesture that said, "Your choice is respected." Then the creature turned, drifting away through space with a grace impossible for something so massive. Its glow faded into the dark until only a faint shimmer remained, like the last ember of a dying fire. Rhea pressed her forehead to the glass, her breath fogging the cold surface. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me." Thane stood beside her, watching the darkness settle once more. "It will remember you," he said. "The galaxy will remember this day." Rhea looked down at the cubs, all of them now fully awake, staring up at her with bright, trusting eyes. She crouched and gathered them gently into her arms, their warmth seeping into her chest, calming the storm inside her. "We're going home," she murmured. Thane's voice softened. "Where's home, Rhea?" She looked at him, then at the sleeping cubs, then at the stars beyond the glass. "Where they're safe," she said. "Where we're together." The Terran Exodus turned slowly, engines rumbling as it charted a new course through the starlit dark. Behind them, Meridian grew small. Ahead of them, an unknown stretch of stars waited, uncharted, dangerous, full of ancient mysteries and older threats. Rhea stood with the cubs in her arms, Thane at her side, and the future unfolding like a vast, endless sea. Whatever came next, primes, hunters, ancient laws, forgotten wars, they would face it as a pack. And in a universe built on power, dominance, and fear, one undeniable truth echoed silently through the dark. Sometimes the strongest force in the galaxy is the one that chooses to protect.